and welcome to another virtual edition of Beebe Book Buzz. This is your Wakefield librarians here to bring you new books to tempt your tastes for the month. I have a cat here who is very interested, and I'm just going to introduce her because she's going to drive me crazy otherwise. And we have four of us here today. Karen Stern is me, Jackie Powers, Bridget Black, and Beth Redcliffe. And we have quite a variety as usual. I'm going to start today with a really different one. It's called Dictionary Stories. And I'm going to, partly I chose this book for a bunch of, I'm having problems focusing, in case you can't tell. And this is a lot of really short offerings within a book. I wouldn't even call them short stories exactly, but I'm going to explain to you what they came from. So the book is called, as I said, Dictionary Stories by Jez Burrows. And full disclosure, I was once one of those rare creatures called a lexicographer, somebody who writes and edits dictionaries for a living. I worked mostly on dictionaries for people who were learning English as a second language back when dictionaries were still in paper. And one of the things you do as a lexicographer that people don't think about that often is you write example sentences. You have to illustrate the meaning of the word. You have to illustrate the context, the typical context that it comes in. You have to illustrate grammatical structures. And so people don't really think about the example sentences in dictionaries, but Jez Burrows did. And he was one day, his attention was caught as he was looking up the word study, a particular meaning of the word study in the dictionary. And he saw this example sentence that said, "He perched on the edge of the bed, a study in confusion and misery." And he was kind of struck by the random melodrama of that sentence, right? I mean, it's just like, where did that come from and why and who thought that up? And that is how the idea for this book was born. So what these are, to put it very simply, is they're like little mashups. So he took 12 dictionaries and he poured through them for years, it sounds like, and categorized all these different sentences and then stuck them together into these little mashup stories. And some of them are 2 lines long, some of them are maybe 5 paragraphs at the most. And each one, every single line is made up of an actual dictionary example sentence. Not a single bit of filler in there from him. He just pasted them together, and you can see he's underlined each word that was being exemplified, so you know what it's from. The result is very distracting in a good way, because you never know what you're going to get. I mean, they can be bizarre, they can be funny, they can be dramatic, they can be poetic often. Some of them are sort of little mysteries, little romances, a little bit of sci-fi, histories, or some of them are all of that stuck together. And you really just don't know what you're going to get when you go to the next one. But no matter what you get, it's something that's kind of, I like it because it sort of sparks your imagination. So I'm going to give you a really quick idea of what it looks like, because it's set up. You can see he's got the A like the dictionary, right? And there's some little pictures and stuff in there too. But so the first one is, the first section is called aggression, for A for aggression, comma, passive. So passive aggression. And then the second section in that one is called animals. And then there are stories under each of those sections. So for instance, under passive aggression, the first story is called John, and it is literally one sentence. And it says, "The English language has over 500,000 words, but John didn't say a word all the way home." So that's under passive aggression. You're left to wonder, why is John feeling so passive aggressive? What is the story behind that? Under the section called animals, we have one called fawns, which I won't read the whole one of, but it's, "She drove at a furious speed. The baby deer nestled in her arms. The night skies were somber and starless, and it was beginning to snow. The cut was bleeding steadily. And it goes on for another few paragraphs. So again, you're left thinking, what the heck? What's going on? Why? All of those question marks kind of made me think of another use for this book in this particular time we're having. It could be a really good quarantine game party game sort of starter. You could either go to dictionaries online and find a bunch of example sentences and get everybody to make their own and have a little bit of a competition, or maybe, I don't know, read a story out loud, and then whoever comes up with the best backstory for why this thing is what it is, why John is passive aggressive, whoever comes up with the best backstory wins. I don't know. So I just think you can figure out your own rules but it's something that will definitely spark your imagination. And
what a fun idea.
Yeah, and give you something to just dip into.
You could even
randomly.
try making your own definition sentences, because that was just a brilliant one, and so something to rival it.
Oh, the example sentences for right. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Oh, believe me. It's an art form, and not everybody's good at it, but it's fun. And you have to remember, so a lot of these are also found. It's not that lexicographers don't necessarily write every single one of these. They find citations for them. They use huge databases of language that have grammatical structures in them, and they take them from there. So, but
very cool.
It's fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and like it's something you could keep by your bedside at night.
Cool.
And moving swiftly along.
Jackie. Swiftly. Cool. We've got shortened time with more people. I'm going to talk about The Truths by Kate Weinberg. This is a debut novel. It takes place in England, present-ish day. It's like 2015 or something. And it's one of those, like, I don't know, I feel like it's a type of book. It's the enigmatic college professor and the students who sort of fawn all over him or her. And in this case, it's a her. The main character, Jess, decides to go to this college, this university in England, purely because she wants to be taught by this professor. And the professor teaches a class about, several classes, but a lot of them are about Agatha Christie and her whole story, and like her, it's very interesting. So there's kind of like some literary tie-ins to Agatha Christie and her own story, not just her books, but like her own personal backstory. But the teacher, Lorna Clay, is just that enigmatic, like everyone just wants to be her friend, and she has favorite students and she kind of singles them out, and you kind of can see where it's going. So there's also like love triangles and kind of some seemingly inappropriate teacher-student relationships, but it's well done. The characters are fairly well developed. The main character is believable and likable, and you're very sympathetic to her. For most of it, you're kind of rooting for her. She seems to be kind of trying to do the right thing and be a good person. It sort of just keeps backfiring. But it's good. It's relatively fast paced. The author does a good job with the settings. At one point they end up in Italy, and she does the setting there particularly well. It's what you would expect. I mean, it's in the vein of Donna Tartt's The Secret History, but it's not as literary, it's not as long. It's in that kind of.
Does the Agatha Christie thing is there a connection like to the story? Is it a story within a story, or does it reference?
Not really. It's not, I feel like the author could have done more with that. Like the beginnings of that are there, and she doesn't quite flesh it out. And the ending is a little protracted. It goes on a little bit longer than it needs to for not much additional closure.
Right.
But I think it's a debut novel, and I think for a first novel, it's fairly well done. And I would read other things by her. I think if you read for character and setting, that's a good thing. It's not. If you read for plot, it's good, but I don't know. It's not. I don't know that it's.
That's not the main draw.
It's not that's not the. It's more like the atmosphere, the ambiance, the feeling. She invokes that feeling of kind of going off to college and it being this like fresh start, and you're a whole new person when you get there, not the person you were in high school, and then you find out that's who you are. So
right,
that person wherever you go. But you kind of go through that with the main character as she kind of realizes that.
Is it anything like the whole Sally Rooney normal people kind of atmosphere? Because that's
it does kind of capture that, where I feel like the dialogue is really, I think Sally Rooney does dialogue really well in that way. I think because it sounds like real people talking.
Yes, right. Normal People, is that the one that the TV is based on?
Yes, that's the one that the TV show is based on.
So it's a relationship. I mean, it's a relationship book, and it's very feelingsy, but
not mystery. It doesn't.
It's a little bit of a mystery, but I wouldn't call it a mystery. I wouldn't. If you were just like a person who likes to read mysteries, like this isn't necessarily what I would suggest.
All right.
But yeah, so that was The Truants.
The Truants by Kate Weinberg. Awesome. Okay. Moving on to Beth, I believe.
Yep.
I am holding up the book for Beth. Just
there it is.
Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. And this is a character-driven book. And in her book, it's a debut book too, like Jackie's. And it's set in Nigeria. And she tells the story of a love-filled marriage. But after 5 years, they're getting a lot of pressure to have children. Pressure from her family, pressure from her friends, pressure from strangers, and from the society as a whole. And also pressure from the main character, Yejide herself, the wife. So it's a first-person narration that alternates between Yejide and her husband, Akeem, and provides a really intimate look at both characters. And also that way that authors use that to show you how the same people are experiencing totally different things within the same event. Right. And this is a really intimate look at that because it has to do with infertility. So there are graphic sex scenes, just to note that, if that is going to bother you. Yejide is a really complex character, and so is her husband. She has a powerful ache to be a mother, and her frustration with traditional Nigerian culture, and with their strong will, they all are vying with each other. And Akeem, he really loves her, and he's devoted to her, but he also has to fight these bounds of tradition, these bindings, both of masculinity and of family obligations. So these questions really pose the character: how far will they go? How much will they sacrifice for the sake of family? And the secondary characters, they're also very vivid. They're very persuasive. They're animated with delightful dialogue. And that goes from Akeem's vociferous mother to his womanizing brother to a rival hairdresser. The author really brings this community to life. And when I was reading the book, it doesn't take place in Lagos, which is where most things we hear about Nigeria, most things we read are all in the biggest city, Lagos. So I did a Google search because I wanted to find out where in Nigeria this was taking place. And I found a website called thebooktrail.com. And Jackie's going to share it on the screen, what it looked like when I looked up Stay With Me. So you can, when it comes up, you'll see that there are two places indicated, one with an A and one with a 2, and that is where all the action takes place. And then when you're playing with the site, you can see where it is in comparison to Lagos. And you can use it the other way around. If you're going to go visit, let's say, Sicily, you can put that into their search engine, and you'll come out with a list of books that take place in Sicily.
Oh, that's really cool. So what's that called again?
It's called thebooktrail.com.
Okay.
You have to put the in before it.
Yeah.
We'll make sure to put that in the show notes.
Yes, that'll be at the end of the show. You'll see the website.
So back to the book. The backdrop, that was just a little side.
Yeah,
The
no.
backdrop to the story is that there's police corruption going on. There's a military coup in the offing. So there's all this turmoil behind the scenes that reflect on the marriage. Adebayo is a very powerful storyteller. The prose is really emotionally charged, it's honest, it's wise. I'm going to read you 2 sentences. If the burden is too much and stays too long, even love bends, comes close to breaking, and sometimes does break. But even when it is in 1,000 pieces around your feet, that doesn't mean it's no longer love.
I think that's a really, it's a summation in a way of the book.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That's a really, really amazing line.
And Karen, Books by the Lake did this book, right?
Yeah, we just did this last month in Books by the Lake, and it was a great one to talk about. Yeah.
I think it makes a really good book discussion because there's all these things going on, and the Nigerian culture coming in and discussing that. It's
we talked a lot about how little it makes you realize you're learning things about a culture, but one book can't tell you everything about why the culture has the beliefs that it does, and it makes it sometimes hard to judge a character because you don't know the context that they're coming from. It's a really interesting,
it really
informative
is
book.
You just have to be prepared to feel a lot because it's a very emotional book.
It is.
You'll feel anger, grief.
And there is actually a little bit of, I wouldn't say a mystery, it's not like a whodunit, but there is this sort of element of the story keeps twisting and you keep realizing these new layers and these new stories that till it's finally all unraveled at the end. So there's something of that to keep people going as well.
Yeah, and also to note with that there is a resolution at the end and there is a little hope at the end.
Yes. Yeah, despite some of the sadness, there's definitely
exactly. So that was Stay With Me by Ayobami Adeyoba. And I have read-alikes if you guys want me to note some read-alikes.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
One is Lauren Groff's Fates and Furies. That's also about a marriage that's on the rocks and that's heart-wrenching. And the other one is another
very different setting, though. Hugely different setting.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. More the same setting is Chimamanda's Ngozi Adichie's book. Either of her books, Half a Yellow Sun and Purple Hibiscus. That also deals with the push and pull of Nigerian culture and definitions, old and new, of masculinity and femininity. So that's a really wonderful one. That's it.
Great. And finally, we have Bridget, who's going to talk about a classic.
Yeah. So we're going to a totally different place entirely. We're leaving this planet. We are going to space, and we are going to the desert world of Dune by Frank Herbert. I know that a lot of people have probably heard of Dune, but not read Dune, or possibly read Dune as a younger person. I certainly did. I read it in high school. You could probably name quotes from it. The very popular one is, of course, "Fear is the mind killer." Many people know that one. But what is Dune? If you haven't read it, So it is a sprawling science fiction epic set on the desert planet of Arrakis, which is also called Dune, which is possibly the most powerful planet in the universe, because it is the only place where a vital ingredient for intergalactic spaceflight comes from. It is about a young man who comes to this planet and is a chosen one type figure. So that's sort of where we are. We're following Paul Atreides, who's also known as Muad'Dib, who is a chosen one in this culture. It's very long. There are lots of sequels, so it's a big world to really like dive into. I think that it's a great book to read as an escape because obviously not this planet at all. But it's a very emotional book because it is a book about becoming a man, your family connections, falling in love, finding your place in the world, even if your place in the world is on this planet, on a totally different planet, and you are like a religious figure.
So parallels to my book.
Yes, there you go. It's right. Like why Dune now? And partially there is a movie coming out in the winter, hopefully. That is the plan. That stars Timothy Chalamet. So if you have if you enjoy him and you want to be ahead of the curve, you can read this. He plays Paul Atreides, so you can see him there. But also, I think that for people who really enjoyed Game of Thrones, this is actually what I've been thinking. If you really liked Game of Thrones because you enjoyed sort of the palace intrigue and the fantastical world building elements, they're both present here. Because there is a lot of intrigue between families and who will end up on top. That's ultimately kind of less important than the like spiritual and religious things that are happening that are operating outside of the realm of that sort of court intrigue things, which is very similar to what happens in Game of Thrones, where there's a lot of like jockeying over like who will be king, and it's like really that doesn't matter, because what matters is the fact that there's
this lady with dragons, like
exactly, there's a lady with dragons and there's snow monsters that are coming, so that's right, you can pay attention to. And here it's like, who's gonna be in charge of this planet? And it's like, well, actually we should be paying attention to this like deep prophetic learning that's happening underneath, because that's what will really determine, even though that leads back to court intrigue.
When was it originally published, British?
So it was published in the 60s. I think I'm trying to look really quick. So the first edition is 1965. And it's kind of interesting because this is also a climate change book in a way, because Herbert is from Oregon, and he was inspired by the changing Oregon sand dunes at the time they were.
Oh, that's right. Hence
Wow.
So hence the name, and so he was inspired by his study of the sand dunes to write this book that was like all about like a planet that had undergone sort of desertification. Like that's basically what happened and there's arguments in the book about how they could make Dune like more livable for people if they wanted to spend the money to make that happen.
Right.
So it's sort of interesting that he was very ahead of the curve on sort of a climate fiction as well. And obviously there are quite a few sequels, so if you enjoy it, you can keep reading.
You could spend the rest of your life reading it.
Would you say Parable of the Sower is a read-alike for that? Because some of the things you were saying, like the underlying philosophy.
It's not a read-alike. Like that's the thing. If you like smart sci-fi that is dealing with sort of an interplay of politics and like ideas, concepts in this way, yes, you would probably like both of them.
Except it's much shorter versus huge.
Another like acknowledged master of the form of science fiction. So it's interesting. And like I said, I read it in high school, and I'm realizing as I'm reading it again that I probably didn't understand a lot of it. So it's one of those ones where if you read it and you were like, oh, that was cool, maybe read it again and you'll figure out what he actually was trying to get at.
You're like, oh, that's what he meant.
There's a lot of that going around these days, especially, I think.
Yeah. But I was reading it again. I was struck by how much like Game of Thrones. Like I would really say, like if you liked Game of Thrones and you want like another meaty thing to dive into, it would
good
up that.
That's a good one for us to know about then.
Is this the first time they've tried to make a movie, or is it a show? A movie?
Oh, so there is a movie. This is the
There
second
is a movie.
time they've made a movie. There was also a mini series from the like late 90s.
Actually, now that you say that.
Yeah, and there's a
Was it?
movie from the 80s that is by David Lynch.
And doesn't it
Oh.
star Sting?
Sting is in it. Yes,
He's in it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Kyle MacLachlan is in it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it has an interesting cast that
Was better than the movie, right? Or was it good?
I think so. The problem is, again, it's like an 800-page book, so turning it into one movie is very difficult.
Yeah, true.
So the movie from the 80s is not particularly beloved by many people. Like David Lynch heads don't really like it, and like people who like the book don't really like it. So it's kind of in a weird place. I think the miniseries people like a little bit more, but it's kind of has that sci-fi production values of the late 90s. So
right. Yeah.
And
I think
is it going to be one movie, the new one, or are they going to cut it up?
So it's going to be multiple ones, apparently.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, they're breaking it up. And I think people are excited about it because they love Timothée, and it's by Denis Villeneuve. So that's for our other.
That's for Beebe Flicks. You want to hear more about the movie? Go to Beebe Flicks.
Yeah, go to Beebe Flicks, where we did talk about the TV miniseries version of Children of Dune. So this is the second time I've been in a Dune-centric conversation.
It's all going on at the library. All right, well, that's probably it for now because we are right up there in the time. And we will see you next time on Beebe Book Buzz. The titles will follow and the website that we mentioned as well. And we hope to see you back here again for our next episode. But for now, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.